this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages.
What I would assume is a small government candidate for the Senate, J.D. Vance, is complaining about those sexually liberated people that change marriages and get divorced like switching underwear. And we have to do something about that because we're not an overreaching government. We're not an overreaching party that wants to control people's lives at all. And in fact, even if it's violent or dangerous, who cares? It's just a marriage. You got to stick in with it. Now, he's also concerned about the children. Keep that in mind. He's concerned about the children in a violent marriage, seeing things, but then the parents breaking up, and that makes it worse. Anyway, he was asked about this, and he got very indignant. But first, let's get his full thoughts about this whole thing with marriage and even violent ones. Let's watch what he had to say.
I mean, I think it's easy, but also probably true to blame the sexual revolution of the 1960s. My grandparents had an incredibly chaotic marriage in a lot of ways, but they never got divorced, right? They were together to the end, till death do us part. That was a really important thing to my grandmother and my grandfather. That was clearly not true by the 70s or 80s. And I think that probably, I was personally, and a lot of the kids in my community grew up in my generation, personally suffered from the fact that a lot of moms and dads saw marriage as a basic contract, right? Like any other business deal. Once it becomes no longer good for one of the parties or both of the parties, you just dissolve it and go on to a new business relationship. But that recognition that marriage was sacred, I think, was a really powerful thing that held a lot of families together. And when it disappeared, unfortunately, a lot of kids suffered. And this is one of the great tricks that I think the sexual revolution pulled on the American populace, which is this idea that, like, well, okay, these marriages were fundamentally, they were maybe even violent, but certainly they were unhappy. And so getting rid of them and making it easier for people to shift spouses like they change their underwear, that's going to make people happier in the long term. And maybe it worked out for the moms and dads, though I'm skeptical, but it really didn't work out for the kids of those marriages.
So there's his context for those first thoughts. I guess it's all better now. Now, by the way, I went through many details of what he's talked about in his past. He talked about his grandparents. They had a very tumultuous relationship, but they stuck together till death do them part. He told a story about how his grandfather always used to drink, and his grandmother got sick and tired of it and said, if you show up here drunk one more time, I'm going to kill you. And you know what she did when he showed up drunk one more time? Again, this is according to J.D. Vance in his book. Doused him with gasoline, lit a match, and dropped it on his ass. And he lit up in flames, and then some other family member came and saved his life. But that type of stuff is what J.D. Vance says you should stick through in marriage for the sake of kids, which he witnessed, and he is self-described, which I'll get to in a second, how he was messed up over it. It's almost like it doesn't make any damn sense. So anyway, Vice reached out to and asked Vance about the most obvious question when it came to specifically that line about maybe they're violent marriages, but we stick through them. Vice News asked his campaign why he thought, quote, it would be better for children if their parents stayed in violent marriages than if they divorced, as well as whether he wanted local or federal law changed to make it harder for couples to divorce. Vance sent this following statement in response via a campaign staffer. I reject the premise of your bogus question. As anyone who studies these issues knows, domestic violence has skyrocketed in recent years and is much higher among non-married couples. That's the trick that I referenced, that domestic violence would somehow go down if progressives got what they want. When in fact, modern society's war on families has made our domestic violence situation much worse. Any fair person would recognize I was criticizing the progressive frame on this issue, not embracing it. Pause. Do you understand what the hell he's talking about, David? Because I've been trying to decipher it, and I have an idea, and maybe I'm right, but maybe I'm wrong. First, I want to see what you think about that, because there's more that he had to say.
Well, a couple of things. I think we've learned that J.D. Vance clearly has something about needing to change his underwear every time he, I don't know, maybe he gets to talk about the sexual revolution. And maybe, oh, by the way, maybe things were better, in fact, when my great-grandparents had their marriage arranged for them and they didn't have a choice. So maybe that's the sort of world J.D. Vance wants to go to. But the thing that I think he's getting at, and this is a way that a lot of dumb Republicans always seem to mess it up, there is a valid point about marriage should be, in marriage really, for everybody who's been through it, it's really more about commitment than necessarily about love. You love your partner for a while, sometimes you don't, but there's a certain commitment that you've made to that partner, and you see it through, particularly for your family. But that's a very different argument than, well, if your parents, if the parents are abusive or somebody's engaged in violence. I mean, in that situation, the best thing you could do for your kids is get them the hell out of there. Take your kids and get away from your abusive spouse. And the fact that JD Vance would somehow conflate these or say, oh no, they're all similar, that goes to show just how much of an ignoramus he really is.
Look at the blurred lines though. I mean, he said, the marriages have to be this sacred, a bond. And he's basing this in how he's running for Senate as a lawmaker. And they even asked, hey, so you want to change laws to focus on marriage? And they said people are taking this now as this next contract, move on to the next contract. In my opinion, you know who thinks marriages are contracts? The government. Because that's what you're signing, is a contract through the government to recognize your marriage. Does the government go around and knock on each door and go, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, you guys having a lovely morning? Are you eating breakfast together? Do you still love each other? They don't give a damn if you're happy in your marriage. They give a damn that you've registered your marriage with the state so that there's some tax incentives involved. Maybe there's other business and economic dealings and benefits that come from that as well, maybe with children. All these types of things are very contractual, but he likes to say, oh man, we have to change government, make sure that they keep loving marriages together, even the hateful ones. Anyway, there's more because he continued talking to Vice about his stances. He said, I can see that you're not a fair person. So rather than answer your loaded and baseless question, let me offer the following. I'm an actual victim of domestic violence. In my life, I've seen siblings, wives, daughters, and myself abused by men. It's disgusting for you to argue that I was defending those men. You know what's disgusting is for JD Vance to think because of his traumatic upbringing that his point means something that more than someone else's. I know multiple people who went through sexual abuse, physical abuse, parental abuse, sibling abuse, were damn near killed. And they came out of it traumatized, but they didn't have the same point of view that he did. He can have his point of view, but when he starts shoving on everyone else because it's what affects him and how he didn't get enough help and counseling to remedy the trauma he went through, don't put it on everyone else. Don't put your opinion on what you think how everyone should behave because of your personal experiences in your life. It's really weird how they think this is something it's a valid point and they can just say to people, hey, I grew up like this, so you should grow up like this. Based off of me. Who are you?
And it underscores that he is still battling his demons, and that's fine. I mean, there are a lot of people who they never get over it. But the idea that, I mean, look, he is forcing this on the rest of us because he has his own issues that have never been resolved. And the idea that's really scary is that this is a guy who's got such unresolved issues about his own, family structure, that this guy thinks that he's a Senate-worthy candidate? Well, now I think we know why so many people are repulsed by him, even Republicans, and why JD Vance's JB Vance's, is that the way I should pronounce it in order to be with you, JR? JB Vance's campaign is floundering. It's floundering even with Republicans, regardless of however you want to say his name.
A last quick thought on this. Guess who endorsed JD Vance for the Senate? It was one Donald Trump. And we're talking about sacred marriages and changing them like underwear. How many has Donald Trump been in? You know what, bro, just a simple question. I mean, Vice could have asked him that too. So what do you think of your president, Donald Trump? He changes marriages like underwear too. He's been alleged to abused within those marriages too. What do you think about him?